Morning. It's so great to be here with y'all. My name is Cyril Jefferson, very proud mayor of High Point, North Carolina. And I was thrilled when I got the email invitation inviting me to be a part of today's discussion. I'm someone who has grown up in the Christian faith. My parents, my grandparents, ministers, they are also veterans, civil servants, and that understanding of being a church in your community, what it means to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and you all being the church. It's so evident. I was telling someone on the walk over here that Forest Hills Presbyterian Church means a special place in this community, and personally to our family. Our boys spent several years at Boys and Girls Club right here in this building. So we'd come in to pick them up. So when I got in, I met an usher as I was walking in the door, and he asked me, had I ever been here? I said, well, not on this side of the building. But I'm glad to be able to fellowship with you all. And then just recently, back in January, Gabe was telling me she was with my wife, Raven, and Raven leads High Point Schools Partnership. High Point Schools Partnership presented an award to Forest Hills Presbyterian Church back in January because of the great work that you all do. And so to be able to be a part of a discussion about what it is, what your strategic plan is, and to speak in some ways as a community voice. I never pretend to have an absolute grip on what every single High Pointer is thinking. I can tell you I get a lot of emails, text messages, Facebook messages, sometimes pigeon messages sent. I get all types of communications, so we do our best to listen and understand well, and hopefully from today's conversation, we'll just be able to figure out what it looks like going forward, and honestly, I'm very excited for Forest Hills.
Thank you. So the first question that we ask all of our community partners, and some of these are questions that we ask in this space, and some of them are surveys that we're sending out, just because we don't have the next 10 years to do this once a month, unfortunately. But would you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself?
You know, John, you got to be careful. I'm only 5 days removed from a primary election. And so when you say, tell me about yourself, I got a campaign stump speech that, we can go the distance here, y'all. As I mentioned, very proud Mayor of High Point. Prior to that, y'all, I served as a city councilman here in town for 4 years. Prior to that, I was an educator, and that's where I know actually Ben Davis. And I was joking with him because he's a classmate of Isabella Poe, who actually is on my campaign team. And so it's so exciting to see young folks. Now, Ben, he scared me when he walked up. Last time I saw Ben was 10 years ago. So Ben was, I guess, 13 at the time. I'm guessing Ben, you're 23 now, somewhere around there, about to be. He's taller than me, and he's got more facial hair than me, and his voice is deeper than mine. And that is unsettling if the next time you see a person, you can barely recognize it. So, so I spent several years as an educator. Also, have been a small business owner. I mentioned my family, just that background in faith and service and what that's taught me. My wife and I have 2 boys. I mentioned before, who have gone to Boys and Girls Club. They are 9 years old and 8 years old. Cyril the second and Royce are their names. And we love them, and they are absolutely just incredible. And I believe my family's just better than I deserve. Some people would say I punched above my weight, or I kicked my coverage, or whatever you have to say. I'm just so grateful and so blessed. But that's it in a nutshell. Now, if there's anything else in particular, glad to add.
That's wonderful. I have also punched above my weight. I have 2 daughters, 6 and 8, and a wonderful spouse. Very good. So one of the things that we're asking all of our partners and community leaders is to briefly describe your current mission and goals. So I guess you could either think of this in terms of your office or the city in general, however you want to do that.
So let me just say this. Ben had asked me just before I walked on stage, he said, what made you want to get into politics? What made you choose to leave the classroom to do this? And the easiest way to explain it is that I loved being an educator. In fact, I still love it. I am, if you talk to my wife, notoriously a sleep talker. So while I'm sleeping, I talk, which is why I can have no secrets from her, because I would tell them all in my sleep. And she would tell you on any given night, I am talking to students in my sleep. I am telling them, hey, pencils down, test is over, or hey, line up, we're getting ready to march out, whatever, because I used to teach music. And I still love it. And the only reason I left the classroom is because, we were working with young people who I thought were exceptional, who I thought were so smart, who I thought wanted the absolute best for themselves. There were students who were coming from environments and coming from areas of town that were historically underinvested, coming from families who had been marginalized and disenfranchised. And you can work very, very hard as an educator, and there's still going to be students who somehow slip through the cracks. And when you care deeply about your students, it's not enough just to say, well, yeah, I'm trying my best, and so be it. You really just, it's just never enough. And I think a lot of us in here, either former educators, but I think I spoke to some folks who are former educators, and even people who know educators. It's just you have an immense and intense love for your students. And so that's what enables so many of our educators to work, even though they're not paid the way that they need to. And makes some of them do it even in conditions that aren't really right and healthy for educators. They still do it because they love it. For me, I want to turn what I was feeling really into just a bigger call for service to say, how do we ensure that regardless of who you are, regardless of where you live in the city, that this city can be fertile ground for you to make it? That you don't have to be the rose that grows from the concrete. Instead, we could give you good soil to grow from, because there would be access, there would be opportunities, it would be fair, and you would see yourself reflected in your community. You would know that this city welcomes you, and not only that, but that we love you. Quite frankly, we can't make it without you. So we want to build a city that's best for you. And that kind of message has resonated across the city, and it's resonated not just in the way that people love and embrace and see the activity happening through revitalization in our downtown, but you also see it in the way that things like our crime numbers are way down. John, if I call you by your first name, also that call you Pastor Phillips too. But our crime numbers are way down, and you start figuring why is that? It's not just that all the folks in law enforcement work very hard to connect to them, we love them, but it's because you talk to people on the ground in communities, they feel that this community is giving them a chance. And you talk to students who I know who have made bad choices. They weren't born, or they don't wake up every day thinking they want to make bad choices. Sometimes desperate circumstances lead them to make those very bad choices. And I'm not here to justify bad choices, just to be very clear, but we are here to say that if you give people better options, they choose better options. And so we became a city that became fertile ground, and is still becoming that fertile ground for people to have those options and to be willing to choose those better options. So that's the sort of main core objective for me as mayor of High Point, and what I work to do every single day. In terms of what that looks like across the city, we are invested in things like housing, we are invested in our transportation infrastructure, we are invested in our local economy, not just through small business support, but also the workforce. We are very mindful of what artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI, is having an impact on our workforce in terms of some of the jobs that it will displace, and how do we equip and retool people to be prepared for the economy as it will be? How do we make sure that we don't leave people behind? One thing I love about Pope Leo, I don't know how many of you all know this, but he chose his name, Leo, very intentionally, because the last Pope Leo was the Pope who helped navigate through the last big industrial revolution in the world. So you go back to look at the last Pope Leo, and you'll see that Pope Leo had to help the world navigate during a time of very advanced upgrades and improvements to technology like we've never seen. And people were being displaced at clips that you can't imagine. And so there was quite a fear at that time, during those late 1800s. You start thinking about the steamboat and the railroads and so many other things that led to mechanical upgrades of the way that we do work. That last pope who had the name Leo, this Pope Leo, chose his name, and if you read about it, again, don't take the words. Google it. His messaging on it is that there is dignity in work, and we have to think about people and what it means for them to have work, and how we prepare them for the work that is to come. And so yeah, we're heavily invested in that too, and quite a few other things that we could probably get into.
Thank you. Our next question: what unmet needs or service gaps do you consistently see in your work? So, for instance, gaps in childcare, digital access and literacy, food security, mental health, transportation, things like that.
Now, it's not a cop-out, John, if I say all of the above.
Well, given your specific over purview, I would say not at all.
I'll start with the first issue you said. Childcare is critical access. It's needed. 90% of brain development takes place between the ages 0 and 3 for young people. And I serve as vice chair of Ready for School, Ready for Life, an organization that is invested in our early childhood systems around the entire county. And we can tell you the data on it is that we just have vast gaps in terms of kids who are not getting access to that early childhood education. And it's going to impact not just those families, but it's going to impact in a macro sense our economy. Because we're worried that we will have those workers needed for a much more advanced labor force. And so childcare is huge. The gap, the digital literacy divide is only going to widen with AI coming into play. So if someone is struggling now because maybe they don't have access to broadband and Wi-Fi and so many other things, that means that they're not being able to take advantage of AI the way some people are. And so in some ways it doesn't feel like an even playing field. And so you've got that issue. We've got issues around housing. I can tell you the city's heavily invested in housing. I happen to believe that it's hard to live the American dream if you don't have a place to live it. And just believe that housing has a human right. What are we doing to shelter those who are on shelter? What are we doing to surround them with the very comprehensive services and very holistic needs that impact a person when they become unsheltered? You mentioned mental health, and honestly, you can't do enough about that. As a city, we invested in our law enforcement having mental health, I'm not giving it the right term, I apologize, but they're basically specialists on staff at our police department, who when you call 911, it could be that you're calling 911 and it was a dangerous situation, but the person there is having an episode. And so instead of sworn officers who show up, who are trained to basically, prevent harm and do it in a certain way, they can show up, and that mental health specialist can show up, who's also trained by our police force to de-escalate better, so that way someone who is dealing with that can be made better. But it's just not enough. I think part of the issue with mental health is that there's a stigma around it, and that mental health itself is not treated as just health, like healthcare, right? If we saw mental health the way we saw physical health, then we wouldn't blame a person for whatever episodes they have, whether it's bipolar, or it's schizophrenia, or it's depression, or it's anxiety. We would just recognize that the same way the body has to be taken care of, the mind has to be taken care of too, and has to be treated. We have to care for those things. So, as a country, we are trying to destigmatize the conversations around it, just change the nature of the conversations, but certainly gaps here too.
Thank you. What types of support, and this may not make as much sense because we're usually talking to community partners that are focusing on sort of more specific areas of help, but are there any types of support that would be transformative for your mission as a city? So things like advocacy, volunteer skills, things like that. So thinking in terms of like how a faith community could begin to sort of help, or really sort of any community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we see examples of churches having conversations like this one, and you really can't, you don't want to undervalue or underestimate how important it is to do a level of advocacy and awareness around issues. I think that's where it all starts. I think where you get public pressure against government being involved in certain things is only because of lack of awareness, right? When someone says, well, our government ought not to, get involved in housing because housing is a private sector issue, and let the developers build housing. And it's like, well, developers, all due respect, have an incentive. Their motive is to make as much money as they can. They are not focused on, can housing be more affordable? And when housing for a considerable amount of our residents costs them as much as 50 to 75% of their monthly income, there's no way they're going to make it. Imagine you spending 50 to 75% of your monthly income on housing-related costs. Some people, that's just where it is. These are not people who are trying to be a burden on our system. So there's folks trying to live the American dream. Right? Some folks who are born here just trying to make it. And so I think there is a level of advocacy and awareness that is so critical for education purposes. I also think that we see, like in the case of what you all are doing with the Boys and Girls Club, saying, hey, can you be your partner? The Boys and Girls Club has that vast mission now in time to expand across the entire Piedmont Triad region. And so that, I don't understand how important it was for you all to do that, to give those kids a free place to play in afternoons, not just to play, but to learn and develop and so many other things. They need that safe space. And just continue to think about that, how you have assets and how you leverage your assets, both human assets as well as property assets and other things to support where those gaps are.
Thank you. And as a former architect, yes, how many developers have experienced that can be sometimes. My final question for you before I open it up to any questions that we all have is based on our goal of trying to identify gaps and needs in our community, do you have any wisdom or any advice for us? You don't have any.
I'm humbled by the question. I think is what's catching me. To see a group of folks who I know, as I've spoken to some of y'all today, the heart that you all have for your mission here, the heart that you have for this community. And you ask me, do I have wisdom for these folks? I'm really asking, I need some wisdom from y'all for me. Would we just give me a little grace here, John? We are at a time in which we have to make daily choices about what we will do, what we won't do, what we will say, what we won't say. And I want to share this brief story that resonated with me. And Tom, you heard this story, so don't tell me where I'm going with this. I was at a summit just a few months ago in New Orleans with several hundred mayors, other mayors from around the country. And the summit's topic was on issues around anti-Semitism, racism, bigotry, violence, things of that nature. And how do we ensure all of our communities are equipped and prepared for addressing that and making it safe and as inclusive as they can be. Well, there was a rabbi at the summit. This rabbi shared the story of two hunters walking into the jungle. And the two hunters, while walking into the jungle, happened upon a great big lion. The lion was fierce. The lion roared at them. The first hunter looks to the second hunter, says, "We should run." And the second hunter looks back at the first hunter and says, "I don't know what you want us to do. We can't outrun a lion." The first hunter looks back at the second hunter and says, "I don't have to outrun the lion. I just have to outrun you." And the rabbi went on to say that the hunter's sort of folly here, the hunter's mistake, if you will, is that the hunter assumes that outrunning the second hunter is okay and will let him live to see another day, right? But that's only a short-term fix, because that first hunter is still in the jungle, and the lion is fierce. The lion has an insatiable appetite. And when the lion is done eating that second hunter, who do you think he comes for next? He comes for the first hunter. The rabbi shared this story as a bit of symbolism about where we are as a country, and that you've got groups. In this case, the second hunter represents maybe its immigrant populations, maybe it's members of the LGBTQ plus community, just people of color in general, people who are living below the poverty level. Whatever it is, there is immense attacks on certain groups of people. And those of us who maybe we don't identify with those groups, well, we're outrunning them. And so the lion devours them, but the lion has an insatiable appetite. It is never enough for a lion, because a lion lives and breeds based on fear, on hatred, on greed. It consumes whatever it can. And what is our responsibility then? If I inform myself only, then what good am I? If the first hunter had thought about it differently, what the first hunter would probably do is look at the second hunter and say, together we stand a better chance against that lion than separately. And so we have to more so focus on what it is to be a country united more than a country divided. to combat the bigotry, the racism, the hatred, the xenophobia, the homophobia, whatever it may be. We have to stand together to address that. And it reminds me of the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And so, I thought the story shared by this rabbi was incredibly profound, and it resonated with me. And what it feels like it is a call to all of us to say, let's not outrun the other groups. Let's stand with the other groups. And together, we have a much better chance of defeating